Good morning, everybody. So my name is Erik Janssen, and I'm leading the neuroscience innovation team at UCB Pharma. And it's my real pleasure to be here today to share with you our vision on how we believe that science and technology will converge and will improve outcomes for patients living with severe chronic diseases, and especially in the field of neurology, which is also my passion. And I would like to share with you our company, what we are doing, and how we're trying to achieve better outcomes for patients living with these diseases. So maybe before we start, I have a question to you. So all of these celebrities that here are on this slide, do you know what they have in common? Somebody wants to make a guess? Do you know what they have in common? No? They all share their epilepsy. So it's a very common disease, but not many people know that these silent sufferers are having epilepsy. So maybe a few nice quotes on these people. Charles Dickens has been describing his epilepsy in his novels. Vincent van Gogh, and I need to be careful that there are not art lovers here in the room, but it is known that when he started changing the way that he was painting, the yellow circles, the more flowing lines, are actually side effects that he was seeing because he was on bromide. So these side effects caused him blurred vision, and that's what he was painting when he made his most famous pictures. So you can see for some of them it had a huge impact. For other people, we don't even know that they have epilepsy. So, and that's what I want to share with you today. What is this disease? What do we know from patients? How does it inform us to develop better science? But also, how does it help us in integrating technology and creating better outcomes for them? So I would like to start with giving a short description on what epilepsy is, because many people don't know it, but it's quite common. Yeah? So it's about 1% of the total population. We know that worldwide, 65 million people are affected by this condition, which is quite substantial. The good news is that 70% of these patients are decently controlled with their medication. So they don't have any seizures anymore. That's what we call a seizure-free status. Unfortunately, 1/3 of the patients still are suffering from regular seizures, meaning that about 20 million people, or even a bit more, are suffering it from a regular basis. This leads to a huge cost to society, and these are only the numbers for the US, but we estimate the total cost on about 50.5 billion, so that's quite a substantial cost. But the most intriguing thing is epilepsy is a social disease. It's associated with a lot of stigma and discrimination. So that's why you very rarely hear about somebody coming out in the open and sharing with them that he has an epilepsy. So people just don't do that. So we're talking about digital innovation, what it can do. We saw some really neat technologies. But this is also a true patient experience. Colleen is a person that I met 2 years ago in Toronto, a developed country, and she was sharing, she was going out, she was having a seizure in public, she woke up, she was conscious again, and she broke 3 of her teeth. And that was because somebody wanted to help her. They tried to stick in their mouth, but that's actually something that you should not do. You see, there's a lot of unawareness also about this disease. So my message here is more, it's not to be provocative, but we really need to change the way that people with epilepsy are being seen, also not from themselves, but also from the external community. So we as a pharma company, we develop drugs. So how do you now start looking into patients, and how can we really help them from a holistic perspective? Because we believe, like matching everything together, technology, science, we can do that. So for that, we did 2 big researches worldwide in 6 countries with hundreds of patients, where we did ethnographic researches and observing them, how is it to live with this disease? So purely observational studies. And we actually found out all over the globe there's a commonality. And the commonality is that the condition is defined by unpredictability. Yeah? Unpredictability of control. You never know if your drugs are going to work or not. You never know when you will have breakthrough seizures. Another part is the unpredictability of your life in between. So seizures are actually only a few minutes, maybe a month, maybe a year, but they dictate all your life in between, because people are afraid to go out because they might have a seizure. So that is really controlling their daily functioning. Also, of course, we already touched upon it, stigma is a true force. Yeah? So people are really reluctant to come out because they feel like people are discriminating them. So even here in the developed countries, until 15 years ago, epilepsy was a psychiatric disorder. These people were locked away and the key was thrown away. If you look into China until 2012, and now it's forbidden, epilepsy was called Feng, and it means mad goat. So that's how these patients were described. So you understand where the stigma can come from. Also, the system is not built for them. Like I said, they are people that actually don't have any symptoms, only they happen to have seizures once a while, but the whole system is against them. If you have a seizure, the first thing that they will do, they take away your driver's license. So it has a huge impact on your daily life too. So the system is really not encouraging or helping patients to get along with their disease. And last but not least, it can happen to anybody at any stage in life, which makes it also a very personal disease with a very, what we call my epilepsy, my journey. Everybody has his own story. So the way that we approach it as a company and the way where we see the opportunities not only for us, but also for our digital partners, it's tackling the unpredictability along all the different steps of the journey of a patient. It starts with awareness, it goes into the diagnostics, the treatments, and also the management of the disease. And I will show you later on a few examples on what we are doing as UCB to tackle these problems. So first of all, to give you a bit of insight, what is the real problem about the awareness? So some people don't even know that they have epilepsy because everybody associates it with people falling on the ground, but actually that's a very small minority of patients. For some patients, it can only even be a blinking of the eye or having a different smell or just being a bit distracted. This can also be a kind of epilepsy. It all depends on where it's happening in your brain and also how big the spot is of which area of the brain which is affected. So the whole awareness around the disease is unknown. You heard the story about Colleen. Also, the people around us that don't have epilepsy don't know how to treat these patients or to work with these patients. The other element of opportunity is all about diagnosis. At this moment, the only proper way to diagnose patients with epilepsy is to EEG and video EEG. Not everybody has access to these solutions. So technologies that can really bring diagnostic tools to home would make a huge impact. At this moment, 20% of the patients with epilepsy are being misdiagnosed in developed countries because it's very difficult to capture a seizure, and we can only go with the anamnesis, what people are saying, what happened. That's just not good enough. Yeah? So that's where technology can definitely play a role. The treatment gap or even the diagnosis rate in more rural areas like in China or even in the US, the diagnosis gap goes up to 70 to 90%. So not all patients are just being diagnosed. So there's a huge opportunity there. Then we come more to the area where we play as a pharma company. It's about the treatment. And we all already heard Nuna saying it's also about finding the right drug for the right patient. And that's what we're also trying to aim for. At this moment, it's a flip of the coin. Yeah? So treating patients with not only epilepsy, but many neurological conditions, you just don't know for which patient the right drug will work for. So we have about a 50% success rate. That needs to go up. Yeah, that definitely needs to go up. The other problem is it takes an average 4 years before patients are on the right treatment scheme. So how can we reduce that time? By proper monitoring, objective monitoring, including different types of technologies to measure and track symptoms much better will make a huge, substantial impact. So, and then of course, the last but not least, like I said, these patients want to live a life in between. And I think we all do. We don't want to be seen as patients. We want to be seen as people with potentially a condition, and we just want to live a normal life. So we want to have non-invasive management tools that can help us, that can engage us in this disease, because we can see, we can track that we will do better. Yeah? So around that management, there's a lot of work to do. What a lot of people don't know is actually, we talk about non-adherence, but it's often what we call the power to choose. People deliberately don't take their medication, yeah? Because they want to go out, they want to have a beer. If they have epilepsy, they cannot combine alcohol with their drugs, so they deliberately take it away, but it results in breakthrough seizures, new hospitalizations. So it has a huge cascade of effects that we need to tackle, and I think we can do much better there by the integration. So key point is, we talk about it's an individual condition. Each journey is different. Each patient deserves a personalized approach. And that's what we try to do. But how do you do this also in an environment which is changing? So we know that the patient is getting more demanding. There's a huge pressure on cost, an aging population that will also result in many more chronic diseases. So that will have a huge impact. The good news is technology and science is evolving so fast. We heard Ali say that 2/3 of the breakthroughs are coming from the last decades. That will evolve, that will continue, and we need to be at the forefront of that. Everything will be also more integrated. So knowing, measuring, getting the data. So there are some really nice projects ongoing where we're even tracking environmental data of patients to see what is the effect on their condition. So it's not only measuring the clinical outcomes, but also the environmental data can make a huge difference. But that also leads into much more complex and more volatile environment. So how do we as a company navigate in that? And we make a very simple rule. Yeah? It's not about the drug, it's not about the technology, it's not about the data, it's all about the patient. It starts what the patient needs. The patient is the consumer, and how can we develop these solutions around that patient by working together? So that's why we as a company don't talk about we want to get drugs on the market. No, we want to create patient value. And what does patient value mean for us? Patient value is actually quite simple. It means we want to deliver solutions that improve outcomes for patients and outcomes that really matter to them. It's not about getting a new drug which has a 5% higher response rate. That will not make a difference. Yeah? It's more about what do patients really need? Do we understand them well? And then we can start looking into the outcome that we desire. Also, we talked about personalization. How can we ensure that the tools are there to get the patient through an individual journey, that he feels that this solution is for me and not just some bulk thing that can be used for everybody. And of course, last but not least, we want to be these solutions also accessible to as many patients as possible, to the 65 million people of epilepsy that I just described. So how do we start? We start as a company by asking a very simple question: how will it make a difference to the life of patients living with severe diseases? We as a company, and I've given you the example of epilepsy, but we do much more, yeah? But I use this because we have established over 20 years experience in epilepsy, but we're also focusing on other severe diseases in neurology like Parkinson's disease, other neurodegenerative diseases, and also immunology and bone. And what makes us unique as a company, we call it the right size. It's all a question of definition. But it means like we're small enough to be agile, to make fast decisions, but also big enough to do the right investments. And UCB invests 25% of its total revenues on a yearly basis in R&D, which makes us one of the leading companies worldwide. And it's not only R&D in science, it's also in technology. So how does it work? What is the essence of our company? What is it that we're trying to see? And where are we seeking partnerships with technology companies? It's about these things. It's about the ability to really understand the patient taxonomy much better. At this moment, we are treating bulk groups of patients. We call it often the professional patients. Patients where we don't have a good insight on their disease, on their genomics, on their phenotyping, we want to know much more. Before we start testing drugs, we really want to see, is there a marker? Is there something that we can see, a biological pathway, a genetic pathway, and we're trying to develop then drugs that are targeting these pathways. So that's the big change. So it's not more developing me-toos, but really working on specialized medicines, really focusing on biological or scientific molecules. And of course, the latter part, and that's also new for us, how can we ensure that the patient has a unique experience going through this treatment flow? How can we ensure that when he is treated, that he knows what he can expect from disease, and how can we help him to get to the outcomes as soon as possible so that he doesn't need to wait 4 years anymore before he sees a proper result? And that's where my mission comes in. So as a pharma company, we're quite used to a very, let's say, conservative environment. So what we do as a team, we are part of UCB, but we are engaging externally. So my role is to identify who are these leaders in the field of technology and digital health that want to partner with us, that want to transform outcomes of patients together, and then focusing, in our case, on diseases like epilepsy and Parkinson's. So that's what we do. So the way that we look into partnerships, and the reason why we do this is very simple. Our capability, core capability, is developing drugs. You know much better than us how it goes in the field of digital technology. So we don't want to have that in-house. That is your capability. But where we can work together is on the patient value creation, because that's where we believe that the future will be. So that's why for us, looking into companies from a patient value perspective is the first thing that we do. How does it help the patient? What different outcome will it generate? And then we go into the technology and also the business model that we apply. So why are companies, and I'll give you a few examples of partnerships that we do. What is it that we can bring to the table? What can UCB do to you? And there are several things that we can do. So first of all, over the years, we developed a very strong academic network in terms of research on the diseases, understanding the science very well. We call that our super network. So we give also other companies access to that network. The second one is all the insight, the hopes, the trust, all the things that we do, we share that in an open platform. So companies that are working in the same field as us, who are seeking for insights on the diseases, are more than welcome to come to us, and we can sit together to see how we can help you also from that perspective. Also, we have an open approach in terms of our clinical data. So once the studies are finished, we share that to all the people that are interested, so that they can also learn from us what signals that we have detected from a clinical perspective. Also, like I've shown earlier, 40 countries, 7,500 people. So access to our global distribution and network and markets is also something where we partner upon. And then we go more into the latter part, the joint R&D. So we want to share also risk in developing things together. You can envision combinations of drugs and technologies in clinical trials and phase 3 trials. So can we set up programs together? That's definitely something that we do. And we also have 150 million in venture fund at UCB, where we're seeking breakthroughs, transformative solutions for patients, which we also invest in companies who have a potential for the future. So now a few cases to make it really tangible, because that was the theory, but what are we really doing? We have a lot of partnerships ongoing, but I would like to share with you a few. And this is the first one. It's a partnership, a research partnership together with Evogen. I told you already that diagnosis is a huge, huge problem in the developed markets, but also in the developing markets. So a point-of-care diagnostic, cheap, efficient, that can really see if a patient had an epilepsy seizure, yes or no, through the measurement of inflammatory proteins in the blood, is a major breakthrough. Still early on, still research, but we are exploring on how we can partner on this, because we believe that this will have a huge impact on treating the disease. Another one, we talked about the right drug to the right patient. So we set up partnerships like with Georgia Tech in Atlanta, where they have huge capabilities in terms of data analytics, where we are trying to identify, can we identify signatures of response? Like said, giving a drug to a patient is a 50% chance. It's a flip of the coin, and you don't know if it will work or not. So what we do is we are overlaying all different types of data sets, and we're trying to see, can we identify genotypes, phenotypes, digital biomarkers that can inform us that we can have a better response for a specific patient. We're already at 85%. Yeah? It's still too early to go with commercial, but we're really advancing very fast. So what we're also doing now is starting generating data using technologies to inform the system and to test our hypothesis. So this is definitely something really key for us as an organization. Another one is all about the unpredictability of seizures. So how can we make patients feel comfortable that they can go out, that we can inform them when they will have a seizure? At this moment, it's focusing on seizure detection, but you can envision a system where a patient could be informed, like in 2 minutes or in 5 minutes, you might have a seizure, please go somewhere, sit at your ease, rest, so that people feel informed that we can remove the predictability. So we are working together in a consortium where we are developing a device with 3 different modalities, where we are capturing the seizures, where we're working on seizure detection. Hopefully that will be able to be launched in a few years. So that will also be a major breakthrough for patients. Last but not least, in that patient journey, how can we improve then the management? How can we get patients engaged in their disease? There are many patients with epilepsy that are suffering a lot of comorbidities. Depression is one of them, suicidal thoughts. So patients at risk or patients that are at risk of having breakthrough seizures need to be monitored much better, because their breakthrough seizures lead to more hospitalizations and potentially also more death. Something I didn't mention is that many epilepsy patients, and especially those with the severe ones, the mortality rate is quite high. Yeah? So we estimate that the number of patients dying from an epilepsy seizure on a yearly basis is just below the number of patients dying from breast cancer. And you know how much attention is going to breast cancer. This is not happening for epilepsy. So it's a really serious condition. So for some patients, it might be good to have a much better monitoring system with a chip on the pill where we can track how they're doing, if they're taking their medication. It's not for all, but it might be a solution for some in need. So this brings me a bit to an overview of the types of partnerships that we are doing. Like I said, we're working a lot with academic centers. Yeah. We're also working a lot with patient associations, also with venture capitalists, accelerators, incubators, where we're trying to identify early startups that are working in the fields of our interest. A lot of public-private partnerships are in my radar. There are others. So we are also working together with